Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. If you're watching this on Facebook or any of our social media, you can see that I've got some bags under my eyes. I'm feeling a little bit tired. We are almost to the November 1st deadline, and so it's late hours reading essays and getting thoughts back to students and helping them with their conundrums about whether to apply early decision and where. And it's been a really fun 2025. I'm really excited to be on the other side of November 1st. And we're looking forward to continuing great conversation for students of all ages as they think about the college admission and the scholarship process. Today, we've got a really great show lined up for you. We're going to talk a little bit about essays in our final segment and the stereotypical hook and whether it's required for the college essay. We're going to explore a rather recent addition to the college application process, which are glimpse videos, essentially a way for a student to show a side of themselves an admission officer might not see on paper. But before we do that, we want to talk a little bit about scholarships, and especially scholarships that are related to student identity. So joining us for this conversation is my friend over here in Portland, Alex Gonzalez. Alex, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah.
This is a great topic. I think it's an area where there's a lot of opportunity out there for students. You have worked both in admissions and in finance. You work very closely with students who have been eligible for these kinds of scholarships over the years. And so, I think let's just start for those who might be unfamiliar with the existence of these scholarships. What are they? What are identity-based scholarships? And what are some of the ones that are perhaps most notable within
Yeah,
the landscape of higher ed?
definitely. So typically what I would categorize them as is they're serving or targeting a population that has a sense of community, or in the sense that they have there's a mission behind giving those scholarships. And so there's a little bit of a membership that needs to be identified in order as part of their eligibility requirements.
Now, who tends to be the uh, the
Yeah,
awarders of these
yeah,
scholarships? Is it
yeah,
is it typically universities? Is it private organizations, nonprofit organizations? Who tends to offer up this money?
yeah. And that's a great question. I would say that there is kind of that misnomer that thinking that like colleges are the ones who are offering these scholarships. It, that might have been where some of these recruitment-based scholarships came from, or the identity to kind of foster growth and diversity within a college aspect. But that was about 20 years ago. Now
Okay.
it's mainly community organizations, or what we would call outside private-based scholarships. So, and it could range from a community organization like the Chamber of Commerce or a subgroup of a Chamber of Commerce to a corporation that's kind of looking to serve
Hmm.
underrepresented students that are in college or a particular area of study as well.
So these are often organizations that have made a decision about wanting to support students that come from a particular background or fit certain kinds of
Mhm.
criteria. And so they typically have an application process that's involved where students will apply and ultimately some are chosen for these scholarships. Does the money typically go with the student wherever they would like to go to college, or there are sometimes rules that are attached to these? And I know we're talking very broadly here, and there are
Yeah, yeah.
different rules around different scholarships, but what tends to be the case here?
Because they're kind of based in the community organizations or outside of the university system, students typically have the ability to choose multiple different colleges. So that could be private universities, state universities, in-state, out-of-state. So there's a lot of choice. Now, some scholarships might have some particular rules. So, for instance, with our Big Brothers Big Sisters um, partnership, in we there's a scholarship there, the Fidelity Scholars Program. Now, students from all over the country can apply if you're a member state, but the student needs to choose or ultimately attend their home state's college. So that can be public or
Gotcha.
private, but the idea there is for retention purposes that they're kind of building a community and some of the support and retention programs are there. But
Okay.
notably, your Gates Millennium or now the new Gates Scholarship, students can attend really anywhere.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So good to look at the fine print as with any scholarship. Is there
Mhm.
some sort of rule that's attached here? But a lot of the ones that we're talking about, you can really take that money anywhere that you go.
Yeah.
So one of the things that comes up with these identity-based scholarships is that, of course, there are elements of the application where students have to talk about their identity, where they need to share their identity. And there sometimes comes a question from students about personal stories from their lives, moments of vulnerability,
Mhm.
things that, maybe students think they might have to share. Maybe they have different comfort levels in terms of sharing that kind of content. How do students navigate that process of thinking about sharing personal or vulnerable aspects of their identity in these applications?
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great question because it is something that students and and educators, counselors that are supporting these students moving through this have those questions every year. And the landscape or the climate, whether it's admission side or whether it's the scholarship side, we're always kind of hesitant of whether or not what do we share? What is
Yeah.
to the next segment, like what's the hook, right? But I
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
remind students is that these identity scholarships, the reviewers are typically of that community. So
Right.
there's a lot of applied knowledge, shared experience that can happen that in these reviews that we're kind of looking for. I've sat on identity-based scholarships and partner with organizations to help guide their boards as well to like help work through the review process. What are they looking for? And I will say that oftentimes the biggest part is that students try to explain who they are rather than telling who they are.
Mm.
So they'll give like a statistic or a stat or tell you who the Native American community is or the African American community is in the context of society or where they're from and forget to tell their story of how
Right.
their community shapes them, how they navigate through spaces of comfort and discomfort, and what are they learning about themselves. So I think that is the biggest part of these identity scholarships is you really get to explore that as well.
So it's really thinking about where the rubber hits the road in terms of how you experience your culture or your identity, maybe sharing a story with your extended family around a
Hmm.
tradition that you have, or, speaking to something that is really informed by that identity that is a part of your everyday life or was a part of a particularly meaningful moment in your
Hmm.
life. How do
Yeah.
you get students to think a little bit about, and we do this on the admissions side as well, of course, because identity is a big part of the college application. But I
Yeah.
think in these scholarship spaces, it's a little bit different. How do you think about students sharing this content in the context of empowerment and celebration versus sharing stories where things are particularly challenging or difficult or even traumatic? Where would you encourage students to kind of think about how to talk about their identity?
Yeah. And I've seen some really and read some really powerful essays about, let's say, tragedy, a very like compromising place that the student has been in. But what stands out, I think, in the review process is when a student addresses that and then reflects on the situation. So I had a colleague in a meeting talk a little bit about like these are scholarships. So we want to see success. We're not rewarding students for the circumstances that they find themselves in.
Yes.
What we're looking for is that resilience, that grit, that self-awareness. I think those are the stories that really shine. So
Hmm.
that could be maybe it's something that, and maybe if it's too fresh of an experience and you haven't processed that,
Yeah.
and maybe you don't share it. Maybe you share something that's similar, but but you've grown from it, and you have some ways of maybe addressing it, a dealing, a coping, or seeing that kind of empowerment in yourself. Maybe you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be, roses and gumdrops or anything like that, but that you have a little bit of time from it
Yeah.
could be very helpful.
I like that. I think giving yourself that space and time to process, even processing things that you're really proud of, having some distance gives you the
Hmm.
maturity of reflection and an opportunity to think about it within the larger context of your experience. Now, these scholarships, they're not just about identity. They typically also include academic components. There are other elements of the application as
Yeah.
well. As students are looking at these kinds of scholarship programs, are there additional suggestions that you have for how students should engage with them, maybe how they should search for them? Just thoughts that you have for somebody who comes to you and says, "I'm looking for I'm looking for additional dollars for education," which
Yeah.
people come to you every single day and ask you that question, but how you might direct them for this category of scholarship work.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the scholarship searches will include some of the national scholarship. So, FastWeb, scholarships.com, Going
Hmm.
Merry, Scholars for Dollars. There are United Negro Fund as well has lists of scholarships that you can take advantage of. Our blogs we share on great resources as well. Of different identity groups. But then also think local. So we live in Portland. The Asian Reporter has a list of comes out with an article of a list of scholarships for Asian Pacific and Islander students that
Hmm.
are in our
Hmm.
area that are both local and national. So think about those like periodicals, those other resources, community-based organizations that are targeting your high school or your district as well.
That's fantastic. And you mentioned also the scholars that we support with Big Brothers and Big Sisters. I think one of the things that I don't know if our listeners are familiar with, you're obviously one of our education finance experts. You also help to lead this program where we're working with students out in New Jersey. I don't know if you want to take a moment to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing with our BH scholars and
Yeah, it's a wonderful organization. So it's our kind of philanthropical arm of College Coach. BH Scholars, we partner with Big Brothers Big Sisters in um, Essex, Hudson, and Union County. They've been our partner for 6 years.
is it
We
6 years already?
six
Wow.
years. So
Wow.
we support on average about 12 students a year. We have students that have graduated that are going on to their master's programs,
Wow. Cool.
sharing their
That's very
programs.
cool.
Very, very like holistic approach from the admissions and finance side, but also they built their Bright Futures program, which supports alums. Um, this next week, they're hosting a college tour, and their students on campus are going to be guiding that tour for our scholars as well. So
That's great.
very,
That's great.
very excited about our program. We're doing some great work.
It's great. And we have, for the students we support, they work with a team of one admissions expert and one finance expert. And we help them with everything we can on the
Mhm.
college process, college list, essay writing, thinking about how to put the application together. It's been a really great program. I can't believe it's been 6 years already. I
I,
suppose I shouldn't be surprised by that, but it's really awesome. It's something, Alex, you've been leading it since the beginning, I think, right?
yeah, yeah. Since the inception, we've been trying to do this for a long time, informally, and so all the pieces came together, and now we have a formal program. So It's wonderful.
It's great. It's great. And so through that program, folks get all kinds of the advice that you've given here on the show around how to look at different identity-based scholarships. They get college admissions advice from our admissions experts and provide really great and robust support. Are there any kind of final tips that you want to share out with our listeners uh, related to these kinds of scholarships? Anything else that is helpful for them to be aware of?
Yeah, I think that these scholarships are great opportunities, whether they're big or small. The network that that students, if you find yourself receiving these scholarships, can really be really
It's a great
the
point.
most reward to it
Yes.
is the
Yes.
mentorship, the connection with folks, whether they're adjacent to your community or your area, but like the they're there and creating and fundraising behind the scenes. They're and they're advocates beyond the scholarship as well. So.
That's a great reminder because I think you started this segment by talking about community and you're absolutely right. Like these are spaces where you feel connected in a different way. So the scholarship award is fantastic, but having that essentially lifelong belonging to that scholarship program, I think is really special.
Mhm.
So great thing to highlight there, Alex. Um, Thank you for coming on the show, talking through this. I really appreciate you taking the time and good luck with the BH scholars this year as they submit their applications.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. When we come back, we're going to stay in Portland. We've got another guest who lives here in Portland, and we're going to talk a little bit about those admissions videos. So don't go away. All right, everyone, welcome back to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. Our last segment was between two Portland experts, and now we've got two alumni of South Portland liberal arts colleges on the show. Sara Calvert-Kubrom, welcome back. We're excited to talk a little bit about video presence in the application process. And it's great to see you. And we're on video here. So if folks want to check us out on Facebook and check out this segment, we can see whether we are following along with the tips that you ultimately share about video presence.
I did think about that as we as we logged in today. So, ooh, uh-oh.
Let's make sure things that, the background is inoffensive and neutral. And yeah, I didn't think about it, but I think I'm okay. You
Yeah,
can
you check the
make,
boxes we're going to talk about.
all right, fantastic. That's great. So I think that this is one of those things that's actually fairly new. And not a lot happens in the college application process that is really new and different all that often. There's the historical trends around the Common App and essays, and you turning in your grades, and you've got letters of recommendation. But I think a partial product of the pandemic, but also just a move towards embracing technology and giving students an opportunity to present themselves in different formats. Videos have started to pop up as being a part of an application review. And so, for listeners who are new to this, and I will confess, I actually have not yet worked with a student who has done a video for a school that has asked for one. Um, how how are schools using this? What is the format? What's the kind of idea behind these glimpses
Yeah.
into a student's life?
Well, let's first start with what they are. There are some colleges, not most, but a few dozen at least, that have usually often they are optional videos that students can record and submit after they have submitted their application. So
Okay.
usually you submit your application, you then get an email from the college saying, got your application, create a portal, here are your next steps. And then you might be able to access recording a video. Now,
Yeah.
they're short, they're different for each college. Some colleges have a short prompt that you're responding to. Others are intentionally quite open-ended, inviting you to introduce yourself. They're often, 2 minutes. They're fast. Now, some colleges, you're doing this in a platform run by the college's own portal and technology. Others use third-party products. There's one that's really common called Glimpse. You might hear these referred to as video essays, spotlights. There are a lot of different terms thrown out there. I will say one caveat that although I said they're often optional, increasingly a lot of colleges are making these required for international applicants as a layer of checking for English language proficiency in the process. So there are nuances that can be different for different different audiences, different applicants. But they're short, they're sweet, they're often optional. And I have worked with several students who have used these as part of their
Cool.
applications to colleges they've been admitted to. So it's given me some confidence in an area that as an admissions officer, I never dealt with because it is new, right? So,
That's great. That's
yeah.
great. So you and I both, we're doing a kind of a social media countdown to November 1st. And bear with me, this is going to be meander a little bit, but it's going to make sense. And so we were asked to talk for no more than 90 seconds on a video about one topic related to college admission. And I remember, Sarah, as I was recording mine, I think my second best take was my first take. My best take was my 57th take. And then the 55 in the middle were just like all over I was just a mess. And so it was supposed to be 90 seconds. I had a rough idea of what I wanted to talk about. But it's a lot of pressure. It's like if you just turn this thing on and you
Yeah.
go, you, you know, you're not necessarily going to put your best foot forward. How do you encourage students to think about going in and having a plan? What are some things that they should do in advance to think about the content that they want to share so that they don't do what I did and waste hours of time recording content that is not especially helpful?
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. This is human, so everyone's going to prepare in their own way, right?
Hmm.
I'm aware that for myself, I do best with brainstorming and notes and then going with it. Whereas I've helped my husband with some things like this in life, and he needs to practice it full from top
Mm,
to bottom. So I think first the student needs to think about who are they? What is their style? What are their needs? I generally find it's helpful. I did this with that, Instagram video to start with just brainstorming. So a list,
yeah.
maybe bullets. What do I want to say? What are my priorities? Now, if anyone looks at my video, I was second and they didn't tell us it was 90 seconds till I'd already done mine. So mine's over 2 minutes, but that's okay. What I'll say though is first let's think about the purpose. Now, the
Hmm.
purpose of these videos is to bring the application to life a little bit. So ideally, you're going to think of an approach in a authentic, low stress way that just lets you pop out of the computer screen, literally, as a person for the college to picture joining their community. Now, I often get students to think, well, what are something about my personality or maybe my lived experiences that isn't overt in my application? So use this as a space to share something different, something new. So first think about what you want to share. The
Yeah.
second then is prepare your space. So before you even get to thinking about what am I going to say and getting it all done, let's say you're in a room in your house. It should be quiet. It should be clean. It should be tidy. We should test our sound. We should test our video. We should test our light. I have one of those ring lights in front of me right now.
Yep.
Think about those things. You don't need to go spending a whole lot of money. Most teenagers have a lot of these things right now. And with that reference to money, I'll say colleges, I think, are also thinking that this is a lot more accessible than saying, come visit our college, go in person
That's
to an
right.
interview. Pretty much all people that I know, regardless of socioeconomics, have a phone, right? They can record these things. So think about the background, think about how you're going to dress. You don't need to be formal. I told one of my students, you don't need to wear a suit. This is an opportunity to be clean and tidy, but authentic, right?
Yeah.
You're applying
Yeah.
to be a college student, not to go and, be someone on Wall Street or, really fancy. So think about the setting and the purpose. Um, I will be honest, I find that my students get pretty freaked out by these videos. They put a lot of like,
I believe it. Yeah.
oh.
Yeah.
um, and I've spent a lot of time in the past really talking students down, and I start with brainstorming with them and saying, okay, let's think about the parts of who you are that aren't front and center in your application. For one of my students who actually did one of these videos a couple years ago for the University of Chicago, which is one of the schools that offers these, he loves running, and running is therapeutic. It's a stress management tool. It gets him into nature. He went a little unconventional, but you know what? I loved it. He literally ran to his favorite place up this hill, and he shot a video, a little sweaty, but showed the nature around him of where he went.
I
And
like
this was
that.
a glimpse into his world, who he is, right? I worked with a different student who used a video and got into Brown and is there last year. who was also freaked out, but she wanted a more mellow, contained. She was in a dining room in her house, but she kicked everyone out. She got everyone out of the house. I asked questions like, no dogs, let's think about these things.
Yeah.
Some people could introduce a dog, that could be authentic,
Sure.
but we thought it through. She dressed kind of business casual because that suited her. She's a little bit more formal as a person. And she decided to talk a little bit more about her love of food and going and exploring cultures through restaurants and how that's something that she is excited to do wherever she goes in life. And these are just a couple examples, but my point is the purpose is human. It's connective. It's picturing energy and personality. And there really isn't a right or wrong way to approach it as long as it's clear, simple, easy to digest. The hardest one for me, Ian, and this probably won't surprise you, is I have to remember when I talk on video to slow down. And
Yeah.
I think that it's human to in, 90 to 120 seconds to want to cram everything in. But this is an opportunity where quite often less is more. So thinking of a clear message, slowing it way down, making sure the listener can hear and understand you, right?
Yeah.
I think all of these things can make a huge, huge difference. Is that
And
helpful?
it is, and I think it's kind of about a feeling even more than the exact things that you say, right? And I love
Mhm.
the example of your student who is a runner. I think it would have been a mistake for him to talk while on a run. You can imagine that jostling and bouncing, but it's
I
like, all
actually
right,
told him, don't do that.
don't do that, right? But
Yeah.
get to a space where, yeah, you can be on a run. If you feel comfortable in that space, then that's a space where you are most like yourself. And
Mhm.
that's kind of the goal, is to share yourself with these viewers. I'm curious what you think about scripting. I think that, students can be in a position where they might feel like, okay, I've outlined the bullets that I want to talk about. Maybe I've practiced it, but I feel like I got to say this thing just right. And if I write out a script, then that's going to help me to say the things that I know I want to say. How do you feel about that in terms of general guidance, and then what are kind of the things to avoid that a script
Yeah.
might lead you towards?
I'm actually glad that you asked this, and I have a personal example of some risks with this. I think on one hand, a script can be a source of comfort, right? Because you
Yeah.
have this guidance, this support. On the flip side, though, I'll give you a real example. I'm the volunteer coordinator for my son's elementary school, and I'm bilingual. I speak Spanish. And we did a new initiative this summer where we made short videos, one in English, one in Spanish, inviting people of all backgrounds to get involved in the school. It was really
Yeah.
effective. It was great. But guess what? I used a script. And I am obviously looking at it because so much was written for me by a fellow parent. It was impossible for me to memorize. And I recently watched that versus what I did for our social media campaign at work.
Yeah.
And I much prefer what I did for work, where I just brainstormed. I wrote a
Yeah.
list of bulleted terms I wanted to make sure I said. And what I'm doing right now is what I did for our work one, where I have a split screen set up right in front of my face where I had a bulleted list of keywords I wanted to make sure I said. So I have right now, I'm looking at you and I have words like authentic, optional, concise, some of the key things I wanted to make sure I said.
Yeah.
And I think it flows a lot more naturally and conversationally. I think that if someone needs to have a script, you know what, that's probably not going to be the end of the world, but it often doesn't feel as connective on a human level. It often feels like you're reading. And I think that for the purpose of these, where authenticity, frankly, is the goal, a more conversational approach while being concise, which is tricky,
Yeah.
usually is going to be more inviting, more warm.
I think that's right. And for me, I did speech and debate when I was in high school, and impromptu was one of the events that I did a little bit. But what I loved, and I had a friend who was great at this, and it's something that I've taken away his advice here, which is to kind of think in your mind, what are your three spots you want to get to, your bullet points, the things that you have to say. And then how you move between those points is a little bit more flexible. So you can think about, I want to share that I love running. I love talking. I want to share that I enjoy the outdoors. And I want to talk about how this helps me to reset my mind when I'm having a stressful week. So whatever else I say in between that doesn't have to be word for word exactly what I might envision, as long as I get to those main pillars of what I'm hoping to talk about. That'll put me in a great position. Now, I want to transition ever so gently here into the virtual interview. And we've talked about interviews on this show before. Virtual interviews are a little bit different in that they are more accessible. I think people now are pretty comfortable with Zoom. We're on Zoom now. I think students have done a lot of Zoom. In fact, people are probably past comfort and into annoyance with Zoom in some ways. How should students think about a Zoom interview being different from sitting down at a coffee shop or going into an office and having a face-to-face interview? What are some things that they should be mindful of there?
Honestly, with that question, I think it's a lot of the same things that I said with these videos, right? So in an in-person, of course, you're going into an unknown situation, you're checking out a new space. You, in some ways, have a lot more control with a virtual interview, but you do the same preparation of check your sound, check your lighting, make sure you're free of distractions, making sure that you feel comfortably and appropriately dressed. One thing that students have shared with me is that sometimes they forget to make sure that they're comfortable. Like, are they sitting in a chair that feels good? Do they want to sit? Do they want to stand? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Thinking
Yeah.
about it, what feels good in their body, it can actually be really helpful. Thinking to prepare your family that you're doing this so your little brother doesn't walk in, like really thinking about these uncontrollable factors and knowing that the interviewer is human. They've probably had their own experiences of working remotely. They probably understand if your doorbell rings. So I think accepting that there's going to be imperfect human things that could pop up, and that's part of this process, and we have to roll with it with these virtual settings. But I think a lot of my advice is the same, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes sense. I think one of the things that's a little bit different about the virtual space is you pointed out you've got two screens, you've got these great things that you can lean on, which is awesome. They can also be distractions. So, a lot of students have Macs, and when they get a text message, an iMessage from a friend, it pops up on the screen. And I have noticed in meeting with students when they'll look down at the bottom of their screen and back at me because they got a message, and I can hear the ding. Or I can hear the buzz of their phone on the table next to them. So if you're going into an interview, I think turning it on Do Not Disturb, getting your stuff out of your space, out of your field of vision is huge. The other thing that I do, Sarah, is when I'm talking, I'm actually not looking at you right now. I look at the pinhole camera that's right there at the top of my screen. Now, when I'm listening, then I'm looking at you. I also find sometimes you can be distracted by your own self-presentation. And so there's always an option to turn off the self view. And so once you check your lighting and you check whether you're centered and you check to make sure the space behind you looks clean, you can turn that off and just trust that you're not going to have some horrible thing show up on your face. And I think it actually makes the conversation a little bit more engaging if you can't see yourself in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I think so. And, a pet peeve of mine just occurred that I don't know how I haven't said this out loud, but from my own meeting with students and from things I've heard from friends who are still college admissions officers, I really don't recommend ever sitting on your bed or with a, bed in the background.
Thank you for saying that.
Just be at a table, be at a desk, be on your couch, be in a place that feels comfortable and appropriate. I think is really important.
That's right. And the last thing that I'll say, and this feels like it goes without saying, but some students do this, is make sure your whole face is on the screen. You have these students that you can only see from their nose up or, the top of their head. Frame yourself, center yourself, center yourself physically and visually and mentally, all of those things.
I agree with all of that. Have some water handy too. That can be a really good one.
It's good. And it helps you if you have to think about an answer to a question to take a quick sip of water and let there be a natural pause there. Don't be afraid of silence. All right. We've given so many tips here. I feel like folks should feel good about this. And I'm kind of excited about what I've seen and heard about videos in the application process. So it'll be interesting to see how it continues to grow over the next 5-10 years.
I think so.
Thanks for coming on the show, Sarah. It's always a delight to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Ian.
Okay, when we come back, I'm going to try not to lose my mind over whether you should put a hook in your college essay. I'm going to try really hard. But Yeah, stick around, see what happens. We'll be right back. All right, everyone, welcome back to Getting In a College Coach Conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about essays now. And I said in the last segment, I'm going to try not to lose my mind. And I'm really not. I can totally keep it together. And if I feel like I'm about to, then we'll have Shayla here. This is Shayla Bezjak-Martinez. She's our guest today. She's an educator with College Coach, formerly of Harvey Mudd. And she has promised she's going to reel me in if I start to go crazy as we talk about this concept. But Shayla, thanks for coming back on the show. It's great to have you for your second appearance on Getting In.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'll try to reel you in, but maybe I will also just keep piling on top
Maybe
of
we'll
it.
just, yeah, maybe we'll just riff a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm just going to start by saying that my most common note for student essays is that their entire first paragraph can and should be deleted from
Yeah.
their essay. And the reason for that is because it's usually a hook of a first paragraph. And I was hoping that you could just tell us a little bit about what tells you as a reader when you're reading a hook that has been written for the express consent or express intent of trying to get you drawn in for the essay.
Yeah, I think exactly as you are saying, after I read an essay all the way through, or even if I get to the second or third paragraph and I realize, the first paragraph or the first two sentences don't actually connect to what this student is trying to say, or just take up space in a
Mm-hmm.
way that tries to set the scene, or kind of tries to put all of the entire essay into a nutshell and then go into the main story. Um, I also would say, yeah, a lot of the time I'll go back and say, you can delete this. This actually is irrelevant or doesn't contribute to your story. Let's just start here instead. And I'll note where they can just jump right in. So that's definitely something I notice as well. I think students think that they need a hook, and usually they
We'll
don't
talk.
need it, or it's not executed in a way that actually contributes to the story. So you can try with a hook. I will say, as a writer, or I remember when I was younger and would have to write essays, I would start with something similar, but I think I also learned over time that the first thing I wrote probably wasn't the best part of what I was producing. So I could go back and edit, or so I had some help going back and editing those things, and just kind of learned to see that over time. And now I use that skill here to kind of track what students need or don't need as they're writing their essays.
Yeah, the silver lining, I think, when I do encourage students to delete that first paragraph is that usually the first sentence of their second paragraph is a phenomenal first sentence for a college essay.
Yeah.
And the reason it's so good is because the student almost knows subconsciously, like, my first paragraph didn't make a lot of sense to my story. So my first sentence of my second paragraph has to say what I'm talking about here. And when they do that, it's like, just start with that. Just tell me exactly where you are. Now, as you were talking, I wanted to actually ask you a question. When you were reading applications at Harvey Mudd or WPI, whenever you're reading, did you ever did you ever read a first paragraph and say, I'm not interested, and stop reading the essay altogether and move on?
No.
No,
No,
no, because
definitely not.
you have to read the whole essay, right?
Yes.
So this idea of a hook that grabs the reader's attention so they don't put
Yeah.
down the essay doesn't make any sense because we're going to read the whole thing no matter what. Now, where are students getting this idea? Where do people talk about this? I hear students all the time talk about my hook. Where's it coming from? Help me understand.
I mean, I think it's not necessarily anything new. Like I said, I
Mhm.
remember kind of writing my own essays 10 years ago, and maybe you wrote some even before I did. And maybe
Watch
we're
it. Be
fed
careful.
fed those kind of same initial, like, you
Yeah.
need to do this, or you need a hook, or you need to share some big dramatic story. I think now some of those ideas are kind of being shared on social media, so it's just a new way of kind of getting this information out. So of course, I've seen some TikToks or some Instagram reels, or even full YouTube videos about, people, usually young people, explaining how they wrote the perfect essay, or how other people who are only a year younger than them can write a perfect essay to get into all of these colleges. So social media, it's not new, but it is a new version of what has been happening, I think, for a long time.
And who's usually on social media talking about the college essay, at least from the research that you've done across
Yeah,
TikTok and
I've
Instagram?
done some very brief research, which I think is pretty typical when you're looking at TikTok and then you say, you know what, I did some research. I actually watched 2 videos.
Okay.
But one of the videos that I found had 88,000 views and so many saves, 13,000 saves. And it was a person, I don't think she was older than, 22, maybe only
Hmm.
19. But speaking about, these are the things that will get you rejected from college if you write about them in your essay. And other videos are by college coaches, not necessarily us, of course, college coach broadly, or folks who are counselors, who are older, which are also kind of funny to see on TikTok. No shade. I don't have TikTok.
Neither do I.
Um,
You'll be
yeah,
surprised to hear.
but
Yes.
people on TikTok are content creators, so they are trying
Right.
to get clicks and they are trying to have their information shared. Um, and because of that, I would always say, if you see something online or on TikTok or on Instagram, just take it with a grain of salt. Because again, these people are well-meaning. They are trying to help. They are trying to share information, but the way that they share it, or the specific information that they share, might not always be totally true.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it discourages students from sharing their true story because they see a video of someone saying, hey, if you write this, you're going to get rejected from college. Well, number one, I would never reject someone solely based on their essay.
That's right.
We
That's right.
review holistically, and that's just not okay. Kind of in the same way, Ian, that you were saying, you would never read the first sentence and say, I'm actually bored by this. I'm not going to read it at all. There's a
Yeah.
lot of components or a lot of things that go into evaluating college applications. So you are not going to be rejected if you write about the thing that you truly want to write about and share your authentic voice. So that's a little bit of my griff with that. They bummed me out.
No,
That's why I only watched 2 videos in my research, because I was like,
there's
I
such a
can't. I'm
bummer.
bummed out.
Well, and the ironic thing about TikTok is that you really do have to hook your viewer because you can
Yeah,
just swipe
yeah,
past
wow.
it. And so, like, you have to say something in the first, I don't know, 2, 3 seconds so that somebody
Yeah,
will watch your entire video and
exactly.
hopefully subscribe to your channel, right? To your feed. And so there is pressure in that context to get people hooked early on and to say
Yes,
things that are wild and inflammatory or attractive or just that
yes,
get people excited.
yes.
And fundamentally, what we try and do is get all that stuff out of the way and just get down to who you are as a student. I think one thing you said just a moment ago that's really instructive is understanding how the essay fits into a complete package of a college application. And when I
Hmm.
was writing essays over 20 years ago,
Whoa.
that's right, I'm a little bit older than you. I had a book of successful college essays. I didn't have TikTok
Mm,
and I have Instagram, but I had a
hmm.
book that said these students got into highly selective colleges and these were their essays. And so I read this book and thought, oh my gosh, these essays must be the key to understanding this process. But what the book didn't say was how strong are these students' grades? How good are their test scores? What do their letters of recommendation say? What kind
Yep.
of involvement do they have? And most importantly, what it didn't say was, did the admission officer even like their essay? Because there are
Yeah.
lots of circumstances where you admit a student and their essay is fine or not
Yeah.
especially good, but like the rest of their file really is awesome. And so you can have a mediocre essay with a phenomenal application that surrounds it. and still get into really, really good colleges. And that was something I didn't understand. And so I was like, oh, well, the
Yeah.
essay is the key and this is the roadmap. And I think knowing that context is so, so important for families to take away.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I sometimes when families are asking, like, how do we go about this process or what's going to take the most time? The essay does take a lot of time because it is where the student is putting their brain power into completing this application. It's the place where we get to hear the student's voice from their perspective. And it's the first time that that happens. The other time that happens is in those supplemental essays, which are also important and are also a way where
Yes.
you can share your, true, authentic voice, but also your true interest and true stories that have happened to you, or true experiences, or true moments of growth that don't need a hook. They just need your authenticity in them, I would say.
Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about metaphors.
Okay.
That's how you put it on your Look, I love a metaphor. I love an analogy. I am all about them. I think that they're fantastic. However, any ideas about how students should think about metaphors in their essays and whether it's a good idea? Um, I don't know. I'm like leading the witness here. Um,
Yeah,
tell me a little bit about metaphors and essays. Like, what do you think, Shayla?
I don't love them.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's very similar to a hook because oftentimes you're going to see the metaphor be presented as a hook or be presented in that first paragraph. And there have been essays that I've read where after I've read the full thing through, I realize that the metaphor actually isn't needed at all and does not contribute to I guess like the meat of the story. I think
Yes.
typically it's more fluff, so it's a way to add more words or to add some descriptive language, but sometimes that kind of descriptive language takes away from you talking about yourself, and that's essentially what we want in the essays, is for you to share about yourself and not to share about how you're an ocean breeze floating on the pier. I don't know. No shade to anyone who's written like that, but maybe go back and check and see if you can remove those things. Um, it takes a very strong writer to be able to pull that off in
Incredibly
650
strong.
words. Mm-hmm.
Incredibly strong. And I think the biggest problem with writing a metaphor essay is that when the reader gets to the end of your essay, they think of it as being about the metaphor, as
Mm,
opposed to being about the takeaway.
yep.
So, like when my colleague says, "Well, what was that student's essay about?" And I'd be like, "Well, it was a metaphor about the ocean breeze." It's like, well, what was it really about? What are
Yeah.
we learning about the student? And so,
Yep.
what happens with metaphor essays or essays that are gimmicky is that the summary, the takeaway for the admission officer is the gimmick you used or the metaphor you leaned on, and not what you're trying to say about yourself. And so it pulls the attention away from your core identity, not just by devoting too many words to something that isn't relevant, but by defining your essay in this way. And so I've asked
Yeah.
students point blank, like, do you want your essay to be the ocean breeze essay?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you want to talk about how much you love surfing and what that means to you?
Mm,
Let's focus on the surfing piece and how that helps to center your mind. And let's get this metaphor kind of out of the way.
for sure.
Any other like common mistakes that you're seeing from, and I will say this, students just making their best guess at what will make a great essay. And this always comes from a place of students being like, I have to do this because this is
Yeah.
going to make this essay great and I need to stand out. So
Yes.
they're not wrong for believing that or wanting to do it. It's just that they need a little guidance to simplify. But is there anything else you see students that are
Yeah. I mean, it
routinely?
sounds cliche, and I know sometimes I'll say this directly to students, like it sounds cliche for me to tell you the person that you are or who you are is unique. And if you just share that, you don't have to worry about standing out because you are an individual. And like, yeah, maybe you've done similar things to other applications or other applicants that we're going to see, but you're the only one who's experienced it through your perspective and can write about it in that way. So, um, again, I'm always going to come back to like authenticity, being genuine, and letting your voice come through in that way. I'm big on voice. That's everything I would look for in an essay. Can I see this student on campus? Can I see how they're going to interact with people based on what they're telling me in their essay? And that doesn't involve metaphors usually, or hooks or gimmicks. It's just, be yourself, and tell us who you are.
I often will give feedback that says, you are the main character in this story,
Yes.
and I need to understand who that character is.
Mm-hmm.
And if the story is being told without that character, I walk away without knowing you better.
Yeah.
Shayla, this is great. I don't think I totally lost my mind. I felt my voice elevate a little bit there a couple of times, but I appreciate you keeping it steady. Thanks for coming on the show.
This was good. Thanks for having me.
We will be back again next week. We're going to do our sequel to college admissions in the media. So talking a little bit about how this shows up in movies and television. It's going to be a lot of fun. So you'll want to come back. It's a nice post-November 1 episode for you. And then we will, of course, talk about education finance, talk about putting merit on your college list and thinking about the balance that you need in order to get a little bit of extra money from those schools that are really happy to incent your decision to attend. Until then, I hope everyone has submitted all of their applications for early action, early decision, and that you've had a lovely Halloween without thinking about the scariest thing of all, which is a terrible hook in the start of a college essay. That just scares me. I hope you all are well. We'll look forward to seeing you back here again next week. Bye-bye.